Let's look at several different models of motivation. Motivation, human motivation, is an incredibly complex field, and we can't describe it completely. We can't describe a set of rules that describe how every single human is going to be motivated. So what we do is we look for general trends, and we call these different trends models. These models can vary in complexity. Sometimes in models, we might just have two variables, two psychological constructs, a cause and an effect. And if we see something, we say, oh, there must be this cause. An example of this might be like, motivation depends on one's genetic makeup. So the genetic makeup is the cause, and how people are motivated is the effect. But we can also have multivariate models where we have a number of different causes that we consider to have an effect. And we might have human genetics, we might have a person's environment, we might have the decisions that they make. All of those things work together to contribute to the effect that we're looking at, what they're motivated to do. So that's a multivariate. Bivariate means two variables. Multivariate means lots of variables. And so that's typically how we describe models in organizational psychology. Now, for these models of motivation, we're going to look at some models that are described by metaphors, comparisons. We're going to look at the person as a machine, viewing people kind of as a very machine-like way, which was popular in the early 20th century. Then we're going to go the opposite direction, which happened in the 50s and 70s, where people viewed the person as a scientist. And then finally, we're going to look at a more contemporary view, where we've got person as a judge or a decision maker. And this goes from the late 20th century to present. So we're going to look at these three metaphors, these three different models of motivation, none of which is perfect, all of which have some truth, but we'll see as that the more contemporary models tend to be more accurate and describe a greater percentage of the phenomena that we can observe. So let's start off with our first metaphor, our first model, the person as a machine. The main idea is that either nature or nurture determine behavior. Now, what do we mean by nature or nurture? Nature is our genetic makeup, what makes us humans. All humans have some things in common, but then we've also got some things that are different genetically, and that's our nature. So there's a human nature in general, and there's also the individual genetic makeup, the nature of individuals. Now, in contrast, there's nurture. That's one's environment, how one grows up, what one learns, the experiences that somebody has, all the stuff that comes from the outside and influences us. That's our environment, and that's called nurture. So back in the early 20th century, nature and nurture as determinants of behavior were the main model. We were basically a machine, and we would be motivated according to our nature or nurture. So in the early parts of the 20th century, Freud, when Darwin was picking up speed, there was more nature than nurture. People would emphasize the human nature stuff. Freud emphasized instincts, inborn tendencies, our motivations that directed behavior. And these inborn tendencies were what determined human behavior. Darwin, who developed the theory of evolution, emphasized how our environment has shaped our nature through evolutionary processes. So the main fact, the environment, what was outside of us, enabled humans to evolve in such a way as to be more fit and adapt to whatever the environment was through evolution. So that was some of the early theories there. Around the 1950s to 70s in psychology, rather than emphasizing nature, there was more of an emphasis on nurture. and this was especially true with B.F. Skinner and the model of behaviorism. And from Skinner's point of view, in behaviorism, all motivation is based on our interaction with the environment. It's everything that we've learned from the environment. Kind of the humans are kind of blank slates, and we learn from rewards and punishments. And as we learn that, oh, if I don't read the textbook, I'm going to get a bad grade, therefore I don't want that punishment. I'm going to read the textbook, I get a good grade, oh, I got rewarded, therefore I'm more motivated to read the textbook in the future. So Skinner emphasized nurture more than nature, the idea that we learn from our environment. We don't especially think or choose, we just learn from rewards and punishments, and that's what causes us to be motivated to do something. So the person was very much a machine. There was not thinking, was just kind of secondary to Skinner. Now, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a combination of nature and nurture. You're probably familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The idea is that the bottom level here, we have physiological needs like breathing, food, and water. And if we're primarily motivated to get those physiological needs, and it's only when those are met do we go up to the next level of needs, such as safety, and then they've got some higher orders like love, belonging, esteem, and finally self-actualization was supposed to be the best thing that could anybody have. And so now there's a lot of problems with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's we don't really find that when we measure these things, motivations don't go in order. You've got to have these needs met before you're motivated to achieve this need, and so on. We see that all of these needs are present in virtually all humans, and some people, they don't get the greatest sense of satisfaction from self-actualization. A lot of them get it from the loving and belonging level. But Maslow had this triangle, and with this hierarchy of needs, and there's nature. People have different needs, but there's especially nurture and environment. When one level of needs are met, people are motivated to meet the next level. And so that's a mixture of nature and nurture. And that was popular in the 50s and 70s. It's what's known as a stage theory. You go from point A to point B to point C to point D. Those were very popular in the 50s and 70s. And always the last point was a white male university professor. That was always the final point on these stage theories. And that's part of the reason that they've gone out of style. Part of the reason is that life's a lot more complex than just going through stages as well. Now the next model, the next metaphor is a person as a scientist. And this is the idea that humans make rational decisions rather than just acting because of because how their environment influences them or because what their nature is. Humans think and make rational decisions. An early model of this was Vroom's expectancy theory, popular in the 60s and 70s. And that's the idea that we as humans, we analyze what's going on. We take in all kinds of data about our environment. And then we start thinking about, we hypothesize what would be the results of various behaviors. Also, what's going to happen if I read the textbook tonight versus what's going to happen if I watch television tonight. And these result in expectations. That's why it's called expectancy theory. Basically, you're doing a cost-benefit analysis, like what's the costs involved in reading the textbook tonight, what are the benefits, what's the net benefit of that decision, versus another decision, or what's the cost involved in watching TV tonight versus the benefits. And we figure out what has a better overall cost-benefit analysis, which will be better for us. And we develop goals and choose the most appropriate action plan. So I am certain you would choose, I'm going to read my organizational behavior textbook tonight, because that has much more benefits compared to the costs, far greater than what a television can provide. And then we choose a strategy and then act that out. Now, the major problem with this person as a scientist is that humans aren't as smart as we'd like to think we are. We have what's known as limited or bounded rationality. We're not very good at calculating the cost and benefits and foreseeing all the consequences. And for example, the book Thinking Fast and Slow emphasizes how sometimes we really do think about things rationally, but most of the time we're using all kinds of mental shortcuts to get to where we're at. And so the person as a scientist, as this very rational being, seems like a cool idea, but in reality, when you actually start measuring what people do, it is not a very accurate way of describing people's motivation and behavior, because of their limited ability to analyze and foresee the costs and benefits of their actions. Now, the third metaphor, the third model that we're going to use, is the person as a judge, or sometimes this is said the person as intentional, the idea that we make decisions, we intend to do something, we make intentions. And this has its roots in the early days of social psychology, and Kurt Lewin in the 1940s started coming up with all kinds of theories on how humans interact with each other. And one was his force field analysis. And here we've got this little bean-shaped thing is supposed to be a human being. Get it? Human being? Bean-shaped. Not funny. So behavior is influenced by all the psychological environmental forces acting on a person. So all those different arrows pushing on somebody are forcing and shaping and changing and bringing into stability, depending on what the forces are, the motivations, and the behavior that a person has. Now, this is in contrast to the fallacy of a single cause. The fallacy of the single cause is if we see a person do something, we can say, oh, I know why he did that. It's because blah. Well, no, it's not just because of blah. It's because of all kinds of things. There are all kinds of factors. Because some people, blah happens to them, but they don't do what that person has. There's all kinds of factors that are influencing us constantly, and they all interact together to shape our motivation and our behavior. Now, this person as a judge became especially popular during a period of psychological history called the Cognitive Revolution. And this is the 1980s to the present, and it was a reaction to Skinner's behaviorism, the reaction to Freud's determinism about human nature. But it's the idea that humans make decisions about their behavior. Now, this is not a intuitive, obvious idea to scientists, because it's really difficult to say, well, why can humans make decisions? It's a lot easier to think of something as being more deterministic. Now, intuitively, it seems like we do it all the time, but all the evidence points to that, yeah, we do make decisions about our behavior. And these decisions are motivated by many factors. They can be our rational thoughts, or they can be our emotions. They can be social relationships, identity issues, all kinds of things. All kinds of different arrows, all kinds of forces are coming in and influencing us. And that's pretty much how we view things in organizational psychology now, is that we've got all these different forces acting on all these different motivations, and human beings are very complex. Now, from a Christian point of view, which is really important to me because I'm a someone who wants to personally follow Jesus Christ with all of my life. It corresponds to a Christian version of humans, a biblical view of humans. Because in the cognitive revolution, this idea that humans make decisions, that means they have responsibility for their decisions. They can decide A or they can decide B. And this idea of personal responsibility for my own behavior is a key idea in Christianity. I'm not simply the result of social or environmental or genetic forces. I'm responsible for what I choose to do. And it also fits in well to the Christian worldview, because we say that our motivations are influenced by many, many factors, and this idea of many factors accurately reflect the complexities of life. It's not a question simply of following a set of rules and being righteous because we follow a set of rules. Turns out we can't do that. The set of rules aren't complete enough for us to really know what to do. There can be rules that'll show us when we do something wrong and that we're guilty of violating rules and we're guilty of doing things that are bad, but just having a set of rules or a list of things to do doesn't take into account the complexity of life and shows how we really should live. Whereas in contrast, Christ gave us a set of values that we should aim for, to love others and to experience this love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, and gentleness, and all these characteristics that the Holy Spirit brings into our life. That gives us more of a direction of where we should go rather than a list of rules to follow.